everyone. Welcome to the Chapel Podcast. Glad to have you here. I'm Brandon Holler, the senior pastor here at the Chapel. And we recognize that 60 minutes on a Sunday morning with sermons and announcements usually isn't enough to talk about all the different nuances of what we would like. So we've created this podcast as an opportunity to further conversations, make connections, and provide clarity. Excited that you're here joining with us. I'm also joined with Anna Miller, longtime Chapel member. We've known each other for, it feels like maybe almost 20 years right now. Yeah. Wife to Kedrick for over 14, 4 kids. Anna's a registered nurse and also serves at a Hope Center. And it's awesome to have you here.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. We've known each other a long time. A lot of times when I think about you and Kedrick, I remember performing your guys' wedding ceremony, but your mom and dad have been a part of the Chapel for even longer than you and I have, and they help out at our membership class. And one of the things your mom always does when she introduces herself is she says, "You guys may not know this, but Brandon married my daughter," and everyone goes like, "Oh, I thought he married Shelby," and eventually she clarifies he performed the ceremony. That's right. But we've known each other for a long time. You served when I was the high school pastor. Here as a small group leader, you and Kedrick. And the most important thing about Kedrick is he and I won a Chapel basketball championship together several years ago. I'm sure you remember that.
Yeah. He was just saying he was bummed he wasn't asked to be on your...
He told me that. That's right. So, well, I'm glad you're here. As you know, we're in the midst of a sermon series called Position and Posture, really talking about tough conversations and questions that people have about what should be our position about this tough topic, but also, I don't know that we talk about this enough, but what should be our posture? A lot of times in these difficult discussions, our distance is so much that we think the solution is extremely simple and obvious. But the closer you get to people, it may not change your position, but I think it should change your posture. And so far we've talked about tough topics like sexuality and identity. And last Sunday we talked about the topic of life. Last Sunday I began by talking about just the beauty of the gospel and how it provides life, eternal life, and also just kind of this newness of life that comes by following him and obeying him, and went through just looking at Jesus and that he offers this life also that is a gift, this physical life that we have. And began just talking about the question that people have is, when does life begin? How should we view that? I went through a lot of passages, like in Exodus, that talked about as if a pregnant woman gets hurt and there's harm to the child, there should be life to life. Some people interpret that differently. The way I look at it is like, that's a life in there. We go into the Psalms. David talks about how he was sinful at the time his mother conceived me, showing that, there's personhood in the womb. In Psalm 139, we're wonderfully made, and God has numbered all of our days. Jeremiah, that God had a purpose and a plan for him before he was even born. And then finally, I talked about in Luke, 2 kind of unplanned pregnancies there, with Mary getting caught off guard and having one before her time, and Elizabeth having one after her time. But when the two of them came together and met, this John the Baptist in utero, filled with the Spirit and leaping for joy. So we really kind of came to this conclusion that our position is life begins at conception as we look at Scripture and should be protected. But that our posture, one of the things that we need to consider is there's a life of a mom too. And she's very much involved in this. And how do we come around those who are considering, what to do with maybe a pregnancy that maybe I didn't necessarily want or was unplanned, but also what we've referred to as the post-abortive mother, which is probably the right way right wording to use there. And what does that mean? What does that mean for her? So I just want to kind of start off like, this topic's really important to you. Just talk a little bit like, why'd you become an RN? And just how kind of God brought you to where you work right now, and because obviously it is an important topic for you.
Yeah, it is. I've always been passionate about babies. That's what led me to nursing and choosing that career. I started in the NICU as my first job. So right off the bat, I'm taking care of babies that are 22, 23 weeks, seeing their life, seeing them fight for life. And then God led me to a Hope Center. I wasn't even looking for that job, and I was approached about it. And I remember as a little girl buying clothes to donate to a Hope Center, and I always thought it would be neat to work there, and God just orchestrated that out, and I've been there over 10 years now.
Wow.
And have learned a ton. So, yeah.
Well, that's great. And one of the things that I talked about in the sermon is that it seems like, as medical advances continue to happen, some of these early births, like as even young as like 22 weeks, there's this possibility for fighting, and not probably too many of them end up having maybe a long, what we'd say maybe a typical or life, but there's more and more as medical advances happen. There's these little lives that are having more of a fighting chance as time goes on. So one of the things that we've done with all these series is people will kind of just send in questions. And I just want to throw some of these out there and just kind of get your perspective on it. One of the, how would you respond to the person, and I hear this a lot, just that saying of my body, my choice. I hear it all the time that this is my body, my choice, and I think some people would say that that's not your body, it's attached to your body, or it's a part of your body, or it's within your body. But I think on the other side, which I think you would even want to make sure that we know is, there's some validity to that too.
Yeah, I mean, really after working in this field, it is, my first thought is it is your body, and it really ultimately is your choice. But we do go through educating, what's going on inside your body too, so you can make your best decision. But my first thought with that slogan is, you're right, it is your body, and you do get to ultimately make that choice. And
it's a tough one, and it's an important one.
It is. It's just making that best choice, and if you're a believer, and then that maybe takes on a different discussion. As far as what's going on inside your body too, delving into the spiritual side of it and when life started, but opening their eyes to that as well.
Yeah, and so kind of take us into like your experience of 10 years of doing this, as you've interacted with women who are considering abortion, as they maybe come into a Hope Center, or if you just have people in your life, like what type of stories are you hearing from them? What type of situations do you most commonly run into?
Yeah, so really we've seen everything from, the young teen moms who their parents are encouraging abortion, to even married Christian couples that just the timing wasn't right, or they didn't want children. And sometimes, honestly, those are the hardest discussions. And everything in between. And just what's awesome about this ministry and the chance I've been given working there is really getting to know the women and their situation, and getting to be a little bit a part of it and walk through that with them. And it opens your eyes just to what they're going through, and just all the different scenarios, and just it's that compassion side really takes over. I thought I had my feelings about abortion and my stances and what I would say, until I really day in, day out work with these women. It just opened your eyes.
One of the things that we've talked about from time to time, and I've had other pastors share this with me, is, and I alluded to it just a little bit ago, I heard a pastor one time say, the farther you are from a situation, the simpler you think the solution is. And you kind of touched on that a little bit. Before you were in this, it was like, hey, I got my position.
Right.
But then you get closer, and you have relationships. Now you have faces. You've got maybe friends. And, I've seen people react in maybe two ways. On the one hand, it's been, I now have this relationship in my life, and so because I've got this increased compassion for them, I'm now going to shift my position on this, which we would say that shouldn't necessarily be the case. We here at the chapel, we talk about God's word is the sole authority for our lives. But really, scenario two is, I think, what we should really be after, which is knowing God's word as solidly as possible on position, But as we get closer, and I think this is what we really want, is closer to people, hear their stories, see their faces, is maybe not our position on, I think in this particular topic of when life begins or anything like that necessarily changes. But what I found is like compassion changes, our understanding of them, our heart goes out to them.
Yes.
And we want to come alongside of them. I mean, you've got incredible opportunities to do that.
Yeah, you listen to their stories and, you know, they've had a different life than you've been given.
Right.
And you just learn so much. Your eyes are opened. Just really learn that compassion side, like you're saying. And then you just handle it differently and relate to them differently.
There you go. That's good. Well, another question that kind of came in is there are some real, as you mentioned, you talked about people have different upbringings than us, and or just even different scenarios that come into their lives.
Life situation,
And one of the ones that's talked about, you know, quite a bit is what about in the area of rape or incest? In other words, I think I've basically heard the line of argument this way, that it's too painful for the mom to go through the entire process of having a child and even bringing it, you know, offering it for adoption or even keeping it, because that horrible, which it is, horrible situation is kind of tied to that pregnancy and or eventually that child. Like, kind of what are your thoughts on that? And has there been a lot of that you've run into?
Yeah, so thinking back, I mean, maybe I've seen it once or twice in over 10 years where they've come to us with that situation. So it is more rare. It is something that you do have to be really sensitive about, like you said, just because of the horribleness of the situation, but it is more rare. But in talking to people about that situation or how to maybe respond to that, the rape itself is such a trauma, as we know. So then you add abortion on top of that, and you're adding another trauma. And so really thinking of it as a way of like two horrible traumatic experiences potentially won't make it right, you know. And so maybe opening their eyes to the potential of a different choice and how that could maybe bring some beauty from the situation too.
Yeah. Have you had a lot of stories where you've seen kind of the other side of it, where it's like, you know, I think sometimes we see them on TV or online or something like that of you know, I even just shared in my life, you know, where I don't know if I'm a survivor of the abortion age or something like that, but my mom was definitely getting in her ear, like, this is not a good time, you know, and this is kind of outside. I mean, it wasn't a rape or an incest situation at all. It was, you know, it was different. But we've heard stories, or we've seen video. I don't know that I know any situation personally of, there was this really horrible situation of how I got pregnant. But I was able to deliver that baby, and this is my daughter now, or this is my son, or I gave them up for adoption. Very many of those stories that you've seen or have heard just in what you've done?
From like a rape or traumatic, so not a lot, just because we don't see it as much. It is more often what I see is just not the right time. They just weren't wanting a baby then, and so that's where we work with them on that. It's
hard sometimes to get statistics. You know, I've heard people say, like, how much is that really the case? You know, in a lot of people, I've heard them say, well, because that scenario of incest and rape is a real scenario, there should be this ability for that to be available to women, but we're really talking about a small percentage. And just hearing from your experience in 10 years, only like a couple times, it sounds like that's you know,
the situation.
Entered into your office or your workspace there. And some statistics we even say that in those two scenarios, it's less than 1%, and but that more often than not, it just isn't a good time. How do you talk through women? Like, what are the different, how do those conversations go? Because the majority of them, I've even seen up to 96%, whether that's right or not, is really just this isn't the right time, or it's going to impact a career that I want to get to, or in my friend that I shared with her story this past Sunday, she's 19 years old on an athletic scholarship, and it just would have, there would have been consequences to the trajectory of her life.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Typically, I start out telling them, any choice you make is going to change your life forever. There's 3 options, and they're all going to change your life. So it's basically just working with them on thinking through, not making that rush decision that day, but thinking through what choice do you want to live with forever. So we start there, and we do, just walk through it. What support do they have? And maybe opening their eyes to different support systems, that they're strong, that they could make this choice if they were wanting to. No woman really does want to choose abortion. They really, it just goes against our nature. But as you talk with them, you can see where they feel like that is their only choice. So we start, we try to open their eyes to maybe the other options, and it just open discussion and just hearing and listening and relating to them on just what they're going through. Yeah.
Absolutely. Are there any scenarios where as you've interacted with women, where even you, maybe this is just a personal thing for you, and this isn't a Hope Center or anything like that, but is there times where you feel like abortion could be considered? I think a lot of people would say that if there's the health of the baby or the mother that's at risk, that maybe ethically, morally, biblically could be maybe a case for it to happen. Could you speak to that a little bit? What you think about that?
That's a good question. And I've never been in that spot. It would be hard, as a mom, if I knew my life was in danger for my other kids. But I mean, ultimately, if you're a believer, God is in control and He can do anything. So there's that side of it. How many times have we heard of, babies being born differently than the doctor determined or said, stuff like that. Right. So there's that side to it too. But even just speaking to grieving from an abortion or handling an abortion, as opposed to a miscarriage or a death of an infant, a stillborn, whatever that would look like, that situation, those are 2 very different paths. Okay. So that's something to think about too, is, what do you want to live with? And that grieving process is so different, where you have time to maybe love that infant for a little bit, or, that is a different grieving process than that abortion where you don't know what would have been. Yeah. So that's one thing we bring up just to think about, that maybe they hadn't thought about.
One of the things that my friend said, and she went to a Hope Center, and a Hope Center was so helpful for her as a post-abortive mom, and she talked about this discipleship piece that they took her through to kind of help her on the other side of that decision, and it was just so healing to her soul. And one of the things that she shared with me, which you're alluding to, is not a lot of time. You think about, hey, if I keep this baby, there's these consequences, right? I might lose my scholarship. I may not be able to get down in my career or whatever it is. And there's some things that that this pregnancy would really inhibit, one way or other, of where I feel like I'm going in my life. One of the things she shared was really interesting is, but they don't typically think about these other consequences that are down the road. Can you hit on that a little bit? Do you think she was referring maybe to just kind of like the emotional grieving and all that? What do you think she might have meant by that? I
would think so. And that's something we tell our women is just, this doesn't happen to everyone, but from working there so long and coworkers that have had abortions and things, a lot of the times we see there are effects after. And so that's something we educate on. Again, it may not happen, but we do see it a lot, just like there's side effects to any surgery. There's side effects that emotionally, spiritually, relationally, that maybe they're not thinking about. So we do talk about that. Like I said, that choice too will change your life forever. Yep. And we do see women that, initially it feels like a relief, it's done, but it may hit them later in life or when they do decide to have children. So we just bring that up so they're aware, and to really think through, again, that lifelong decision. So, yeah.
I didn't tell you I was going to ask this question, so I'm going to throw this at you. Is it typically just women that come in? Does the father ever come in as well?
Yeah, we do see men, and we like it when we see men. We encourage that. We bring them in for results if the mom's okay with that, and so talk to them too. They're a big part of that as well.
Well, that's where I was going with that, because I've heard from time to time, like, this is just a woman thing. Mm-hmm. It is her choice. It's not y'all's choice. Mm-hmm. And how do you feel about that kind of idea and that concept? Like, where does the dad fit into all this, or where should the dad fit into all this, in your opinion?
Yeah, it's something to think about. I mean, the dad, we do see, and there's research out there, how the men are affected by abortions as well. It might look different than women, but they are affected. So that's something to consider. And also, when I ask the women I'm talking to, what does the father of baby think? And usually the answer I see most often is, he'll support me in whatever I decide. And I think the father and the mom think that is supportive, and that's a good thing. But what we need men to do is to step up and say, we can do this, you can do this, I'm going to help you, let's choose, let's have this baby, let's do this. That's what's really supportive.
Yeah, great. Yeah, boy, that's fantastic. So we've talked a lot about the woman who's considering. Mm-hmm. What about the post-abortive mother? Mm-hmm. What is, as you think about her, right now, you said you've got some coworkers that are post-abortive as well. I've got friends that are as well. What would you say to the post-abortive mom right now that may be listening and maybe asking, like, I am still heartbroken, I'm still struggling. What would you say to her?
I just want them to know that there is help, and there is hope, and there can be healing too. That's why we have our post-abortive ministry, for that reason alone, where someone can walk, side by side through that healing process. And it's such a silent thing, usually people don't share that about themselves. So there are probably people all around you that are in your inner circle even that have had abortions that you just would have no idea. Right. So another reason to be sensitive to what you're saying in your conversations. But just on a personal standpoint, just that you're still loved, you can be forgiven, you are forgiven, and just to work through that, and that we can help with that, or find some place, there's other places in Fort Wayne too that can help heal that hurt. That
ministry was just vital for my friend who's post-abortive on the other side of it. And one of the things that I just asked her is, like, what was so beneficial about it? And she said she just feels like so much of what we've talked about in the first 2 weeks of this sermon series was so helpful. In other words, we talked about sexuality, that we've got a sexual integrity problem. God has a design for this. And if I think, especially for us as Christians, if we commit to God's plan to that, we obviously won't find ourselves in the scenario. And God knows what He's doing. He knows what's best for us.
Right.
I from time to time said, every time God says do not do something, He's got two loving motives behind it. To prevent us from something harmful and to provide us with something better.
Yeah.
And I think just especially in that realm, He's trying to prevent us from situations like this, right? And He wants to provide us with that relationship down the road with that man and woman, that they have this full intimacy with each other. And that's one of the things that she said is just was so helpful about that is she said, Brandon, what you've talked about, that sexuality is so key in this conversation, that they all blend in together. And not only that, but when you talked about identity, she said that's what was so important, going through what a Hope Center offers, which is, okay, my identity, my noun is not I'm a post-abortive mother.
Right.
My noun is I'm a daughter of God. I'm a saint, not a sinner. I'm I am an heir. I've been forgiven. I'm washed. I'm clean, and just really kind of reprogramming my identity to my past experience, from my past experience to my reality in Christ. And she just said that was so helpful for her. A couple things that was really important in that for her specifically. I don't know if this is still part of what Hope Center does or not, but for her just getting to a point of, she even like named the child. And she said that was really, really helpful for her in her grieving
Healing.
process, because it placed personhood. I think for her, she was like, it placed personhood on my child. And because of her belief and our belief in the grace of God, that she'll see her child again one day, and is looking forward to that. And those have been healing pieces for her. So as we kind of come to a close, a Hope Center, like what are some services there? We've kind of hit on this this post-abortive ministry that you guys have there, but if I'm a young woman coming in to come to a Hope Center, like what should I expect? What's available for me there?
So everything is free of charge to the client, first of all. But we do offer pregnancy testing and then limited STI testing as well. Different reasons for that, but that ties in the post-abortive counseling. We have parenting programs that are awesome. So, a mom may choose life. I had a couple that recently that they're from another country, and they just had no resources and did not see how they could continue this pregnancy. But they're part of our program now, and you do parenting classes, you learn, and you get free baby things in our boutique that way too. So we really try to come alongside up to age 3 to get your crib, your diapers, all of that. So that's a side program. We have fatherhood program as well. So talking about those men again, men volunteers that meet with these dads or soon-to-be dads and help them along that journey as well. We offer free ultrasounds too to see is it viable, is it in the uterus, things like that, to determine as they're making their decision as well. So those are some of the things. And sexual risk avoidance, a newer program we started, we're going into the schools and starting to hit it before we get to this issue.
Right. Yeah,
so
exactly.
That's a newer thing as well. So yeah.
When you just think, I'm just now throwing stuff at you that's not planned at all, but just like hearing you, for me as being in ministry, so often it boils down to people and stories. Certainly not giving up any names or anything like that. But has there been just a couple stories that you can think of? There's like this is why I do it. When I say, and it can just be vague. Like this is like as I get up in the morning, like I'm praying for this.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I mean, that one couple is a little bit more fresh in my mind, and they were just, you spend time with them, you cry with them, you work through this with them, and that is like, that's what we're there for. And just helping them see we could choose life, we could do this, and how they could do it. The situations where the moms just seem so hopeless and have no support, and you feel for them, like how could you choose life? It's so hard. But when you work with them and get to that point where they realize I could do this, and then you see that baby on the other side. There's some moms in my mom's group that I know have just have hard stories, and to see them there with their baby now and coming, and it's just, that's what brings the joy in the job, and it's such a ministry. And it can be a dark, spot too, to be in, but to be able to be a light and just show them a different way and just be there for them. Those are some of the stories that really stand out to me. Yeah.
Well, I just very thankful for you and how God's using you and the others that are part of a Hope Center. Maybe for some listeners, they're thinking about what can we do? Is there any way we can help? And I'll let you think about that for just a moment. But if you're a part of the chapel, you're already helping. We have different missions partners, whether locally or internationally, that we, when someone gives to the chapel, 10% of what everybody gives goes straight to missions. And we've had a partnership with the Hope Center for a long time. And so when people join in our mission, part of you are being a part of the mission of what Hope Center is doing as well. And so I think it's for people to important for people to know that too. So it's a wonderful partnership we have with a Hope Center as well. But any other ways that you feel like people, if they're like, man, there's a way for me to get involved, what would that look like?
Prayer, obviously, is a big one. Also, volunteer. So largely we're run by volunteers. And there's an application process for that, and you are trained really well to meet with these women. So that's a really great option if you really want to get, like I said, I thought I knew a lot till I started working there. So if you want to get in the heart of it, let us know. We can go through that process and see if it'd be a good fit. But donating things too as well, baby items. So those are some different ways. Yeah.
Well, before we conclude, any final thoughts you have? We've gone through a lot.
I think this is great that this is even being brought up, because a lot of people are, shy away from talking about it. So yeah, I just appreciate that. Yeah.
Well, thanks for being in the mix. You're right there on the front lines of some pretty heavy stuff.
Yeah.
And your heart for Christ and your heart for others is pretty remarkable. I've known you for a long time. Really appreciate you and your family, and it's wonderful, not just to be able to know you and Kedrick and your family and your mom and dad, but to know that our common belief in Jesus and the way that it manifests in following him in many different ways, that one of them, God has called you to this specific ministry, and it's wonderful to see you do it and for us to be a part of it in a way. So thanks so much for joining us, and
thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And thank you for joining us as well. Continue to send in any questions that you may have. We've got other podcasts that are going to come up here in the next couple months as we continue to explore different staff members, different missions partners, but also continuing to expand conversations off of sermons as well. Thanks again for joining us, and God bless.